Zach, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Katie, your email sounded ominous. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Someone just ran a red light and hit the front of the
Right.
car pretty hard.
Okay. Well, get that checked out and yeah, be safe.
Will do. Thank you.
Yeah.
How was your drive?
You know what I mean? It's like 95. So like, and then
Which one is Ben Gordon?
Ben Gordon?
Yeah.
He sits right here.
Oh, okay. And who's Cade? I don't know who Cade is. Okay. There you go, Cade. That's you. Okay, that's you. That's you. Ready? You're Sarah? There's two Sarahs. That's why. Evan. All right, folks. We're going to get started. I will try and get these back to you. I've got a lot of dead trees here to get back to you. So if I don't get stuff back to you today, go ahead and I will leave it with Mrs. Schaefer in the Natural Sciences office. Please pick it up from her, and that should help us get this stuff back to you. Okay, we will go ahead and continue. We have some people on Zoom. I have a short announcement. I have some friends from a Bible study group that I attend, will actually lead, and they are moving, and she's disabled, and he has a bad back. So I need some people to do some strong backing, picking up stuff and moving it. So if any of you are feeling particularly strong, sometime say second week in March, and you'll be here and you're available, just let me know. I could use probably 4 of you. If more than 4 of you wanted to strong back for that weekend, that'd be fine. And then if any of you don't feel like strong backing, but your packing skills are good, they could use some help packing as well. So if you feel like strong backing or packing, you need some community hours for your core class or something, let me know, and I will put you in touch with my friends, and you can help them out. So any help you could render would be much appreciated. They're moving from Concord to the Harbor Meadows over here, not far, but they are just going to need help getting stuff, because if you have a cane and you're trying to pick something up, that doesn't work very well. So just let me know, and I will put you in contact with the right people. Okay, we are talking about drug metabolism, and JP can do the honors for me. No, thank you. Oh, much better. And we're looking at the ways that liver enzymes modify drugs. So let's keep in mind our friends on Zoom, and let's also keep in mind this campus. Some of you, I hope, have plans for spring break. I hope your plans for spring break are good and safe. And let's go to prayer then. Lord, we thank you for this very cold day. And we pray for those who commute and drive. Do keep them safe on the roads. Thank you for those who made it here. We pray you give them traveling mercies back and that roads get cleared by this time. Thank you for our staff, for BJ and his crew who've done really such a remarkable job clearing the snow so we can walk and not fall on our stoop as we go from one place to another on campus. Thank you for this beautiful place now. Continue to lift us up and get us through this pandemic. In Jesus' name, amen. Our first exam is coming up in, let's see, today's the 15th. It's in 2 weeks, right? Next Wednesday, right. So I will let you know what's on it when we get to Friday, essentially, because it depends on how far we get and what have you. So it's next Wednesday. So is there anyone who's jammed up that day with any other courses or anything? Jamie, you have organic? Oh, good night. Anyone else have organic as well that day, Jesse? Is Friday a better day for everyone? No? Yeah, micro. That's really bad. So we might have to keep it Wednesday. They might have to do some sort of special dispensation for you two then. Because organic in my class, that's kind of cruel and unusual punishment. Yeah. Micro in my class would be torture. And yeah. So I will, we can work something out with the 2 of you. But it sounds like for everyone else, Wednesday works pretty well. Yes? Yeah, okay. So we'll keep it on Wednesday, and then I'll see what I can do for our organic chemistry folk. All right. Now we looked at some of the reactions catalyzed by cytochrome P450s. Remember, there are lots of these enzymes. They have a very wide substrate specificity range. That is to say, they're not very specific at all. They can accommodate a huge number of drug substrates, and they catalyze reactions of all types, but their reactions are largely oxidations. they use molecular oxygen, and they're going to make the molecule more water soluble. And we can see this when you have something that has a benzene ring in it. That benzene ring gets an alcohol put on it, an hydroxyl group, an OH. That makes it more water soluble. Secondly, you can have molecules that are equally not very water soluble. They're nice, straight, aliphatic hydrocarbons. These aren't water soluble either. You address them the same way. You stick a hydroxyl group on the end or on the penultimate carbon. Either way, you're going to make it more water soluble. Then, if you have something that has a double bond like this, the so-called alkene, you make an epoxide. Now, you could just reduce that. That wouldn't help you. Wouldn't help you because now it's even less water soluble. This is now more water soluble. Aldrin, by the way, is a pesticide. It's been banned now, but this just shows you essentially how you can deal with things that have a double bond. Then you can deal with so-called dealkylations. Dealkylation simply means the oxidation causes you to lose part of the molecule. So part of the molecule goes bye-bye. So if you have these situations where you have a carbon attached to a nitrogen, the oxidation will give you a free nitrogen, and then you make, yes, formaldehyde. And that formaldehyde is made in small quantities. In these small quantities, it's not toxic, and that formaldehyde is further dealt with to produce something that is not toxic. So this is a oxidative and dealkylation. So there's lots of drugs that have carbons attached to nitrogen. Here's our old friend here, caffeine. And there are drugs that are in the same chemical class as caffeines. So for example, it's not on here, but some people with Crohn's disease will take a drug called 6-mercaptopurine. And 6-mercaptopurine will suppress the immune response that is overwrought in the GI tract. This drug, yes, mercapto, it has sulfur in it, but because it's a purine, it is also going to have a carbon bound to a nitrogen, and that would be also in this group of drugs as well. You can see that morphine is in here, and then caffeine, and then theophylline. That's a drug we'll talk about because that's used for asthma. Then you have so-called ethers. Ethers, where you have a carbon bound to an oxygen bound to another carbon. There are a few drugs that fall into that category. Codeine is a good example. And in this case, again, you're going to make two moieties that are now more water soluble. That works too. And then if you have a sulfur, you now can break the bond between the carbon and the sulfur, and you make something that once again is much more water soluble. Some drugs have terminal nitrogens. These are called amines. Amines. And again, I have a reputation for having mnemonics that are rather stupid. Amines, a good example of an amine is an amino acid. How do you remember these are amines? Well, these are used to make protein so that your friends So these are your amigos. And amigos sounds a little bit like amines. So amines, amigos, they're your friends. So again, stupid mnemonics. Yes, I know it's dumb, but hey, if it helps you remember it, it helps you remember it. A lot of you are going to remember this because you just said, boy, that was dumb. So you're going to remember it. So this is called a primary amine, and aniline is a dye, and it's used also in some cases as an antimicrobial. And then chlorphentermine is actually a dietary pill, and you take that NH2, oh, lucky, you throw in a hydroxyl group. Once again, you make it much more soluble. Then you have carbon, nitrogen, and the nitrogen is bound to another carbon. That's a secondary amine. Once again, you're going to give it a hydroxyl group. And by giving it a hydroxyl group, you make it more water soluble. And then you have tertiary amines. And tertiary amines are found in things like nicotine, methaqualone, things like that. Once again, now you're going to make a dative bond to an oxygen that also causes a significant asymmetry in distribution of electrons. That's going to be much more water soluble than the tertiary amine. Some drugs contain sulfur. Thioridazine is a antipsychotic, not used very much anymore. It's still available, kind of for when everything else fails. Cimetidine, you can buy that over the counter. It is a drug for an upset stomach. Oh, what's the over-the-counter name? Tagamet, I think. Tagamet, I believe, is the name of that drug over the counter. And then chlorpromazine, another antipsychotic. You have the sulfur bonded to the carbons. Now you're going to bond it also to an oxygen. You make it much more water soluble. I'm seeing a theme here, you? I hope you do. Sometimes oxidation of a nitrogen containing group will cause the nitrogen to be lost. That's called deamination. This ammonium is actually rather toxic, but your liver takes ammonium and converts it into something called urea. Urea is the major nitrogenous waste in urine, and it's not nearly as toxic as ammonium. So this would be an example of detoxification. This is called the urea cycle. Very important cycle in the liver. That's one reason why when your liver goes south, you tend to have ammonium build up, so-called hyperammonification in the blood, because this very important cycle is not being run anymore. But the other thing I want you to see is how these two moieties are now much more water soluble than this. Desulfuration. So thiopental is an inhaled anesthetic, and thiopental has this C double bond sulfur, and its processing consists of replacement of the sulfur with an oxygen. Yeah.
Kind of like, well, off topic, but so like with all these like names of drugs, like you know how like in math class there's like Linnaeus and Tommy, they're like a thing for these, or is it just like the names are like kind of loose with it?
Oh, yeah. Well, thio is sulfur, and it contains sulfur. The common names given to drugs when they're in the same class will often have common endings. We'll see,
Yeah, I know.
but some don't. So calcium channel blockers all end in pene, but then verapamil and deltiazem don't end with a pene. So they are, of course, kind of a different class of calcium channel blocker. So sometimes that rule gets broken. So there's an attempt to try to give drugs that are in the same class common endings, but that rule sometimes goes out with the laundry.
Okay, that's like probably the only rule besides the last eight.
Yeah, the Latin bases don't always get followed either. So I wish there was a logic to it. There really isn't, except for endings. Yeah. Now, this type of structure is very uncommon in drugs. Not to say the drugs don't have phosphorus groups, they do. So phosphates are used, but to have a phosphate bonded to a sulfur, that's not very common. Parathion, when I was a kid, was used to deal with some pretty nasty insects. Then it turns out parathion didn't break down very well in sunlight. And so when people ate the fruit that had been sprayed with parathion, especially if it was sprayed very close to harvesting, they had a really nice trip. And parathion was outlawed if you sprayed it on early so that the sun could break it down, then it wasn't a problem. But people were spraying before harvesting. That was not cool. And then some people used parathion for their marijuana plants, and combined with the THC, they had a psychotic break. So parathion was made illegal rather than marijuana being made more illegal. So parathion got banned, and now malathion is a drug that's used. Malathion is order of magnitude safe, much safer. Malathion, in fact, is used today to treat head lice, and it's very safe. You can drink malathion, and it won't hurt you. It doesn't taste very nice, but it won't hurt you. Anyway, the sulfur is replaced with an oxygen. Once again, you make a molecule that's more water soluble. What do you do with things that just refuse to be rendered more water soluble? Well, carbon tetrachloride is a very good solvent for organic compounds. It's not used much anymore because one, it will do your liver in. Two, it also damages ozone. So if your liver gets a hold of carbon tetrachloride, it takes those chlorines and it tries to get rid of them and replace them with hydrogens. And what's this molecule? Does anybody know what this is? That's chloroform. That very good for you? No. So your liver is kind of stuck between a physiological rock and a biochemical hard place on this one. And consequently, that's the kind of the best it could do with that. Chloroform, fortunately, is relatively soluble in water, so you can get rid of it, but it'll do a fair amount of damage on its way out. There are also oxidations that occur as a result of enzymes that are not cytochrome P450s. So these reactions are cytochrome P450 independent reactions. So you have what are called flavine linked oxidases, flavine linked oxidases. These are some of the reactions they are going to catalyze. So flavine monooxygenases, they are going to take groups that are tertiary amines, and they're going to convert them into something much more water soluble. And these are of interest because that's an antidepressant, that's an antipsychotic, and that is a dietary supplement. Then if you have things like this, where you have nitrogens in between carbons, you can take the oxygen attached to the nitrogen and turn it into something that's charged and therefore much more water soluble. Both of these are antidepressants. JP, this kind of gets back to your question. So Tylenine is for the tricyclic antidepressants come in four different groups really. One of the groups is Tylenine, the other is Ramine. So the medical students, the ramen group, that's how they remember it, because medical students are all poor, so they eat a lot of top ramen. So the ramen group, that's that's my comfort food is ramen, so it's an antidepressant. Okay, it's stupid, but yeah, it's kind of a dumb mnemonics. That one at least is clean. So some of the mnemonics medical students come up with are pretty inappropriate, shall we say. Then we have some drugs that have sulfur, and these flavings can again, instead of catalyzing the removal of the sulfur, they oxidize the sulfur so that the sulfur is a lot more water soluble. You make essentially a group now that is much more polar. And those drugs, incidentally, both of those are anti-cancer drugs. And anti-cancer drugs will have sulfurs on them and that sort of thing. Next, you have oxidases that just handle these nitrogen groups, and they're called amine oxidases. There's a big group of enzymes, and they can take amines, convert them into free-standing nitrogen groups. Those will get dealt with by the urea cycle, and then you make aldehydes, and aldehydes usually can be converted to alcohols quite easily. So epinephrine, and then other drugs that mimic epinephrine, notice they have amine at the end, and that's one of the ways they're dealt with so quickly. That's one reason these enzymes are very widely distributed. That's why epinephrine, if you give epinephrine to try and restart the heart, its half-life is very short, largely because of these enzymes. As in minutes short. Any of you ever heard of Primatene Mist? It's over the counter. It's for asthma. It's epinephrine. And if you take that, it relieves your bronchospasms, but it doesn't last very long because these amine oxidases. Then you have groups of enzymes They're called dehydrogenases. They have different substrate specificities. A lot of these are widely distributed. But for example, ethanol is converted from ethanol to acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde actually is what inebriates you. And these alcohol dehydrogenases, they essentially can take alcohols and convert them to aldehydes. Well, those are oxidations. You then have some enzymes that participate in reductions. So you have so-called azo reductions, where you have two bonds to a nitrogen. And this particular reaction is not very efficient. That's why drugs with azo bonds, they tend to make it most of the way to your GI tract. However, bacteria in your lower GI tract, they can do this reaction very efficiently. So this type of metabolism doesn't occur very quickly. Then if you have nitro groups in a drug, that nitro group can be converted into an amine. And clonazepam, that is a benzodiazepine. Nitrobenzene, of course, that would be a poison. Chlorphenicol, antibiotic, used in veterinary medicine, not used anymore in human medicine because it damages bone marrow. And then dantrolene, a very important drug. All hospitals will have dantrolene on online because some people react to muscle relaxants in a very dangerous way. They get so-called malignant hyperthermia, and this is a drug you give to relieve malignant hyperthermia. Every single surgical unit that uses muscle relaxants, and all of them use muscle relaxants, will have dantrolene online at the ready. Other reductions where you reduce C double bond O, that is called a carbonyl. If you reduce it, you make a hydroxyl group, much more water soluble. And methadone, that's one such drug that's used by federally licensed clinics to treat opiate substance abuse, opiate abuse syndrome, excuse me. And then another group of enzymes that are very widely distributed, these are the hydrolases. And so there are ones that hydrolyze esters. Esters are C double bond O, and then another oxygen, and then you have I'll just say whatever, this arrangement, and this is bonded to something else. That's called an ester. And esterases will give you a water across this, and it makes, as you can see, a carboxylic acid and a alcohol group with a hydroxyl group. Both of these now are very water soluble, and these are all over your body. Most of the anesthetics that are local, many of those are esters. That's why your body gets rid of them after a certain period of time, because the esterases all over your body will degrade them. Some people have very low levels of these. That's why some people are more sensitive to certain types of anesthetics. Amidases, maybe not quite as widely distributed as esterases, but still pretty widely available. They will take amides. We have this bond here, would be to a nitrogen, and that gets, again, chopped up. You put a water across it, and again, lidocaine, procainamide, which is a procaine derivative, indomethacin, that's an NSAID. These, again, two molecules that are much more water soluble. And there you are. So upshot of all this, your body has lots of ways to deal with foreign chemicals. The goal of this processing is to make the molecule more water soluble. Does it detoxify it? Sometimes. Other times it doesn't. So don't equate metabolism with detoxification. Do equate it with making it more water soluble so your body can eliminate it more easily. All right. Yeah, Devin, go ahead. You have to recognize that you take the molecule and make it more water soluble. Those are the strategies your body uses. I won't test you on specific strategies, just so that you have seen in glorious detail that now these molecules get made more water soluble. Now, take a look at page 8 for me, please. So page 8, on the bottom, you have a graph that shows the concentration of theophylline in 3 different patients. Patient A, patient B, patient C. Patient A is someone whose metabolism of theophylline is normal. And there's 2 lines. The top line represents the toxicity line. You go above that, you start to get toxicity. The bottom line is the line below which you don't get any therapeutic effect of theophylline. So notice person A is right in the middle, right where you want it. Person B, what's up with person B? Person B does not metabolize theophylline normally. So in this person, theophylline levels become toxic at normal dosages. You're going to have to dose this person down. There's some people we will see that are not going to, excuse me, that are not going to properly metabolize drugs the way everyone else does. Now, what's up with person C? Person C is a smoker. Person C is a smoker. Smoking is going to take cytochrome P450s and it's going to induce them to higher levels. So their liver becomes supercharged. And now the smoker will chew up drugs much more quickly. You're going to have to dose this guy up in order to get proper therapeutic effect of the drug. Some cytochrome P450s are inducible. Not all of them. Some of them are. And some drugs are cytochrome P450 inducers. So they cause the enzyme to now work at higher levels than they would normally work. Okay. Now, one of those is your cytochrome P450 1A, the 1A group. If you smoke or if you eat charbroiled foods like burnt bread or burnt potatoes or burnt meat, you will induce this enzyme. And if you're taking drugs metabolized by that enzyme, that drug will have a shorter half-life. Then there are other drugs that induce these two cytochrome P450s, cytochrome P450 2C9, cytochrome P450 2C19. These two drugs, so barbiturates, they induce these two enzymes. So does the anti-tuberculosis antibiotic rifampin. So if you take either of those and you're on another drug metabolized by these drugs, those enzymes will be at higher level. So they will degrade other drugs more quickly. That's something to keep in mind. Therefore, in cases like this, you may have treatment failure. Treatment failure. If you take two drugs and one of them induces the drug that degrades the other drug. Other drugs are enzyme inhibitors. Enzyme inhibitors. So for example, ketoconazole. In fact, all of these major antifungal drugs that end in azole, so ketoconazole, itraconazole, posaconazole, isuvaconazole, your mother-in-law conazole, those drugs are all inhibitors of cytochrome P450 3A4. 3A4. And they are notorious inhibitors of this enzyme. So if you're on another drug that inhibits that enzyme, that is metabolized by that enzyme, but now this enzyme is inhibited, now that drug, other drug, is going to have a very long half-life. You're going to start to get toxicity. Same thing with cimetidine, which you buy over the counter. You eat a pastrami on rye. That pastrami on rye gives you a sour stomach. You buy some Tagamet over the counter. You take it. But maybe you're on another drug that is metabolized by 3A4, like, say, a statin. Now, the concentration of this drug goes up, and you start to experience toxicities, which in the case of statins is muscle damage. You start getting sore muscles, and you start getting muscle weakness. That's due to a drug interaction. And you go to your doctor, and your doctor looks over your drug chart. Your doctor can't figure it out. Why? Because you took something over the counter, and you don't remember, and you don't tell her. Macrolide, antibiotics. And yeah, I misspelled antibiotics. Scratch out that O for me, would you? They often also can inhibit some enzymes. For example, this enzyme here, one of the biggest offenders is clarithromycin. That also inhibits 3A4. Okay, please look at page 14. And it looks like the printer cut off. Oh dear. Thanks, printer. All right, that is supposed to say grapefruit juice. Grapefruit juice. Now, grapefruit juice is an inhibitor of cytochrome P453A4. cytochrome P453A4. Erythromycin, of course, is an antibiotic. So let's say you're on erythromycin because you have a penicillin allergy. You have, oh, I don't know, sinus infection. But you really like your grapefruit juice because you've been convinced by perusing these bogus websites on online that say the grapefruit juice is a miracle cure. And it'll do everything from clear up your acne to make your muscles bigger. And so you drink your grapefruit juice. Now, your erythromycin levels start to really climb inside your body because it's not being degraded on a regular schedule. What happens when this gets too high in concentration? This will cause arrhythmias of the heart. You start getting these funny, your chest feels funny, your heart is doing funny things. It causes so-called elongation of the QT wave at those high levels. That's an example of inhibition. Inhibition. Now, let's go to the other side here. Phenytoin. Phenytoin is an anti-seizure med. That's an inducer of cytochrome P453A4. Now, you're taking phenytoin for a seizure. You get prescribed erythromycin for your sinus infection. The drug goes in, gets chewed up like that, because now the enzyme level, instead of being this, is this, because it was induced by phenytoin. Now you have treatment failure. And that's what it should say in the box down there. They didn't get in there, I don't know why. Treatment failure. Does this work for other enzymes? Yes, it does. Look at the bottom one, losartan. Losartan is converted to its active metabolite by cytochrome P452C9. 2C9. Grapefruit juice also inhibits 2C9. In that case, you'll have treatment failure because losartan never gets converted into its active metabolite because the enzyme's inhibited. Over here, phenytoin is an inducer. Now 2C9 goes from this level to this level. And now you activate it too much. And now you start getting dose-related, it should say dose-related toxicities, but for some reason the printer didn't quite put that in. This is the basis of many of your drug-drug interactions. It is the fact that some drugs are cytochrome P450 inhibitors, some are inducers. Some are inhibitors, some are inducers. All right, turn to page 16, please. So phase 2 reactions depend upon the transfer of these rather water-soluble molecules to the drug. These are so-called transferases. These conjugate or attach these big, bulky, water-soluble molecules to your drug. And these are the reactions catalyzed by phase 2 reactions. The most important one of these is the one on top there, glucuronidation. Boy, that's a mouthful, isn't it? Glucuronidation. So if you take glucose and convert glucose to an acid, you make what's called glucuronic acid. Glucuronic acid is big and bulky and water soluble. So you attach it to a drug, and now that glucuronidated drug is water soluble and will be excreted by the kidney. That's not to say these other reactions aren't important. They are, but the most heavily used of these is definitely glycuronidation, and that is catalyzed by a so-called UDP glycuronic acid transferase, affectionately known as UGT. There are several different UGTs in your liver. There's a UGT1, UGT2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth, and they can handle lots and lots and lots of different substrates. Probably the second most important of these would be this one here, glutathione conjugation. Glutathione is a 3 amino acid long peptide. Some of you may have seen glutathione in health food stores, and it's used to detoxify various types of nasty molecules in mitochondria, and it's also used in your liver as well. Glutathione might, and this is a big might be a possible treatment for severe COVID-19, because it's clear that severe COVID-19, one of the effects of severe COVID-19 is oxidative damage to the endothelial cells that line your blood vessels. And so by decreasing oxidative damage, you might be able to mitigate the effects of severe COVID-19. So glutathione is actually being looked at as a potential treatment, supplement treatment for severe COVID-19. There's no data on it yet, but it's being tested. Very good. Let me pause right here, see if everyone is on the same page. Any questions, anyone? You all online, anybody have a question or no? Okay, then I will continue. These genes that encode these cytochrome P450s are subject to genetic variation. So some of these are well characterized, others are not quite as well characterized. These three are very well characterized. Cytochrome P450 2D6, 2D6. People with 2D6, some people with 2D6 don't have any 2D6 activity at all. 10% of the population has no 2D6 activity at all. This is significant because most of your antidepressants are metabolized by 2D6. We're going to cover a group of blood pressure medicines called beta blockers that are metabolized by 2D6. And assorted other drugs are metabolized by 2D6. So 10% of people don't metabolize these drugs at all. At all. The next group of people are so-called normal metabolizers. They have either intermediate or kind of modest intermediate levels of the enzyme. Most of your drugs that are metabolized by 2D6 are dosed for people with this intermediate metabolism. Then you have 7% of the population who have multiple copies of the 2D6 gene. They are called ultra rapid metabolizers, ultra rapid metabolizers. 1/3 of all people of Ethiopian and Saudi Arabian descent are ultra rapid metabolizers. That means if you treat them with antidepressants, or if you treat them with beta blockers or something like that, at normal dosages, those dosages won't work because they'll chew the drug up so fast, it will never get to therapeutic concentration. Or what if 2D6 activates a prodrug, like in the case of codeine, which is a prodrug and is activated by 2D6. In cases like that, you'll have so much morphine in your system, you'll start to have severe abdominal pains. So there are genetic tests you can order for these sorts of things that essentially can tell you what type of metabolizer someone is in that case. The other enzyme that shows genetic variation is cytochrome P450 2C19. 2C19. So people with this one also either have increased activity, normal activity, or no activity. So in those who have no activity, 3 to 5% of all Caucasians will have no activity, but 18 to 23% of people of Japanese descent have no activity. So it shows differences along different ethnic lines. Then there's 2C9. Now 2C9 is of interest because 2C9 is the enzyme that metabolizes the very widely used anticoagulant warfarin. And because warfarin is so differentially metabolized among populations, many physicians now, many hematologists suggest before you go on warfarin, you have a genetic test to see which allele of 2C9 you have. Because warfarin metabolism varies so much, so greatly. (2C9) also metabolizes some drugs for diabetics. So some of your oral drugs that are taken to lower blood sugar are also metabolized by 2C9. In people with abnormally low 2C9 activity, those oral hypoglycemics will cause abnormally low blood sugars. Diet can also influence your enzymes as well, as can the taking of certain herbal supplements as well. We talked about smoking. We talked about grapefruit juice. Milk thistle. If you go to health food stores, you'll see milk thistle. Milk thistle inhibits phase 2 reactions. It inhibits phase 2 reactions. And then St. John's wort is used as a tea for depression. St. John's wort interacts with more drugs than Carter has pills. The list of drugs St. John's wort interacts with is very, very long. It's longer than both your arms. And very often, people don't tell their physician that they've been taking St. John's wort. So it inhibits cytochrome P453A4, and it also inhibits 2C19. Other considerations. Males. Do males have bigger livers than women? Yes or no? Do males have more blood than women? Yeah, they do. It's that testosterone thing. So males have more blood flushing through the liver. That means males are going to metabolize drugs faster than women. Older people, cytochrome P450 levels are lower in older people. Phase 2 reactions stay about the same. Babies, P450s come online very gradually. Phase 2 reactions depends on the drug. Morphine in babies is metabolized phase 2 exactly the way it is in adults. Other drugs, not metabolized at all in babies. So with babies, it's very drug specific. So as I said, these interactions are the basis of pharmacokinetic drug-drug interactions. On Wednesday, we'll actually take a look at some little mini case studies, and I'll have you guys work on these with each other. In fact, I'll pass this out before the end of today. I just like to end today with a little bit of humor. And Propecia is a hair growth drug. So that's your little piece of humor for the day. So I'll pass this out and I'll try to get your quizzes and assignments back to you. Bring this with you, please, for Wednesday, because we're going to go over these. And then for Sarah as well. And then for Lydia too. You're all by yourself.
Yeah, Kathy's not studying at home.
And Emily's all by herself. So lonely. Just deserted, aren't you? Where are my friends? Oh, yeah. Well, Zach is on quarantine. Yeah, I know someone who's off quarantine. Okay, gang. All right, we'll see you on Wednesday.
Did you guys do something?